Oh, are we on, Terry?
We are now.
Perfect, thank you. I want to thank you all for coming tonight and being part of our budget conversation. There are no dumb questions, only good ones, and we have no barriers between us, no table, no safety. So if you have questions, please ask them. And we want to do our best for our kids. So, and we know that you all want the same thing. So I will start by doing what we do, and that is to introduce ourselves. And it's okay if you do it, but we don't say what community we live in. We just say who we are because we're here for the kids, and it really doesn't matter what community we reside in. We're just here for everyone. So I'm Becky Fless, and I'm chair of the board, and I'll go to my right.
I'm Gary Hickey. I'm a select board member.
Chris McGlone, school board member.
Pat Hart, Mayor of Gardner.
Linda Caputo.
Joe Caputo, selectman.
Jane Hubert, selectman. Kathy Cutler, I'm the tax collector and the city clerk for Gardner.
Rusty Greenleaf, counselor.
Simon West, counselor.
Terry Berry, counselor.
Tim Cusick, counselor.
Kay Grant, counselor.
Diane Potter, school board.
Colin McGough, school board.
Bob Benderson, selectman.
Mark Roberts, select board.
I am Tony Veet, I'm the vice chair of the school board.
Greg Kuchar, select board.
Oh, hi, Greg. There's a seat up here if you want to sit with us.
Back here.
Keeping an eye on me. Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking about that, but told no. But I won't tell you no. You're a guest. You get to do whatever you like. Administrative staff. Oh, and Jack too. Jack.
School board.
Great. And who's your partner in crime?
This is Ellie.
Hi, Ellie. Thanks for coming. This is all for you. And our administrative staff?
Andrea Dish, business manager. Pat Hopkins, superintendent.
Terry McGuire, director of technology.
Angela Hardy, director of curriculum.
Thank you. So as you know, we're here to look at this. And Pat Hopkins and Andrea will take us through it. And then there'll be time for questions, for comments.
And Angela is here, and Angela will
Yes.
certainly help us as well. And I would say if you just have questions at the time, feel free to stop us versus just waiting at the end of the presentation. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you taking a night out of your busy schedule to be here. So I've tried to put together a presentation that I hope will be informative and provide you the necessary information on how we ended up creating the budget that we're putting forth to the taxpayers. So, let's see, we have a PowerPoint presentation. Can members of the public see that? Not yet. Okay. And for those of you who've been here before, we decided to move the meeting from the middle school to here because now that we can live stream, we wanted to live stream this conversation for members of our public to help better inform them about the elements of the budget. And that is not something we could have done effectively at the middle school. So we're looking at the 23-24 proposed budget. Here are all the board members. And we have 2 student reps, which we love having the students actually on the board there. They provide a lot of input and value. Okay, then I thought I would just kind of throw in some pictures of this is why we're here, working with for our students. And I thought we could start off with some highlights and some celebrations. For those of you who don't know, if you haven't heard, Gardner Area High School science teacher Sharon Gallant has been selected as 2023 Kennebec County Teacher of the Year. Rebecca McLaughlin, one of our teachers at the Riverview School, was the 23 State of Maine Teacher of the Year through VFW rather. We have Kim O'Brien, who's also an elementary teacher at Riverview. She was awarded a fellowship through the NEA Foundation for Global Learning, and as a result of that fellowship, she gets to go to South Africa this summer and do some work. Pretty impressive, very amazing. We also, I think you've all heard of Lizzie Gruber, who had a phenomenal year in basketball, and she recorded 1,000 career rebounds plus the 1,000 career points So that's exciting. We also have Dylan Elliott. This is new. If you didn't hear, he was recognized just last week that Dylan Elliott, who's a junior at the high school, is the Maine State Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year. Really exciting. The Boys and Girls Club, this is 2 years in a row that students from our high school have actually won the Maine Youth of the Year award, which is amazing. And then we have Sean Jimenez. And Sean received out of 2 students in the state of Maine and only 1 out of 104 students across the country. He was selected to be a part of the U.S. Senate Youth Program. He was a delegate and got to go on an all-expense paid trip to DC for a week. So some of our staff and our students who are truly amazing, very impressive with what they're doing. Then I thought I'd start getting into it, and I thought I'd show you just some enrollment numbers. Since I have been here, our enrollment numbers have continued to decline as we're seeing across the state. So,
Right.
okay, there we go. Oops. I apologize, my April is out of whack. So you can see we started the year at 1941, we're down to 1917. That's a decrease of 24 students, with the majority being at the high school with 13. While we have 9 students down at the middle school, when we opened the doors at the beginning of the school year, Angela, can you remind me? I think we had like 25 students in the first couple of days that we weren't expecting just enroll at the middle school. So we had a huge influx that we weren't prepared for. So to have 9 leave is not necessarily uncommon, but since 2014, we've seen a decline of 122 students. We've tried to be responsive for that decline. We've reduced staffing levels. However, the needs of our students are only increasing. Some more great pictures of our students and some of their work. If you got to see the Addams Family, that was a phenomenal drama event. They were fantastic. And then Gary Crocker was our celebrity reader over at Helen Thompson this past school year. The budget, we really dug in deep, starting in March. And the initial proposed budget, which was only a needs only. We asked for needs only, not a wish list. Came in at almost 3.4 million, or a 12% increase to the budget. And the impact to the municipalities at that time, you can see where that ranged right around 30%. Clearly that was not acceptable. That wasn't going to fly, and we had to go in and make some reductions. The difficult part is last year the board made some really deep cuts, and so we didn't have a lot of place to go for more cuts. We are a pretty lean school district, and I'm going to show you some numbers that support that position. We also talked a bit about, the board talked about unallocated fund balance. Currently, the board contributes the 1.3 million to help offset the impact to taxpayers. And so there's been some question as to whether we could increase that amount to help offset the impact to taxpayers this coming year. And Andrea did a phenomenal job kind of walking us through the amount of money that we have.
Here's what I found.
What our needs are going to be moving forward, and we quickly realized that just as is, we're going to be running out of money in 2026. So we're going to need to start cutting that back. We are, I think the average over the last 4 years, 5 years, that included some ARP money because of COVID, everything else. I think we were averaging around, what was it, 500,000?
We had about 526,000 to fund balance, but you're right, that's artificially increased due to the COVID years, and we didn't spend all of our budget.
And so in a non-COVID year, it was closer to around 300,000. So if you're only adding 300,000, we're quickly going to eat away at any type of balance, unallocated fund balance that we have. So that is a real issue that the board is going to have to address in the next few coming years. So what's the basis for the increase? Just like all of you, we are struggling to hire employees. And what we're finding is that many of our employees are able to go elsewhere for higher pay. So we really struggled with that. So here, the board made a significant investment in order to retain and attract quality people. So we learned that, like bus drivers, we could have people literally go 10 minutes from here and they were making $5 an hour more than we were. If we wanted to keep bus drivers, we really had to bump up that pay. Top of the scale for teaching positions, between $5,000 to $15,000. And people can easily drive within a 30-minute radius to be able to see that kind of money. I will actually show you a comparison shortly so you can see what those look like. We were so fortunate. This doesn't happen often, but we had a 0% increase to our health insurance, so we're really excited. And as a result of that 0% increase and some changes in our staffing level, we actually had a savings in health insurance, which this day and age is unheard of usually. Energy costs, just like most of you, we are dealing with higher energy costs. We're also seeing a pretty significant increase in student needs and the need for nurses. We have medical conditions as well as mental health issues. And so when I first arrived, we had one elementary nurse that was shared amongst 5 schools. Now the need is so great that we have to have a full-time nurse in every single building. And then this next year, we have a student coming in with such, with medical needs to such a degree that that student needs to have a nurse with them full-time. So in order to accomplish those 2 things, have a nurse in every building and to have a nurse for that particular student, we had to add in two nurses. We have, and that alone is like 124,000. We added in a library at Tech 3, and so that each of the schools, elementary schools, will have its own librarian. Last year, when we reduced a school counseling position or eliminated them in the elementary level, it ended up reducing contractual requirements for prep time, and it created a bit of an issue. And so we're adding this back in partly to help address that need, but also there are needs around just physically having enough bodies in each building to be able to operate the building for lunch duties, playground duties, that sort of thing, and that will help in that regard. And a business generalist for the central office. I think we've been saying for years, the central office is understaffed. And we are at a place where we just can't sustain it any longer. We have staff members that have to work weekends, that work nights, they're up at 3 a.m. It is just not sustainable. We need to get some additional support to make the job manageable. So the board was in full support after so many years, and we've kept putting it off because we wanted to put money in the classroom, but we're at a place where we just can't hold off any longer. So some other increases on Maine State's retirement. The percentage that we have to pick up increased by 17% this year. I tried to provide just a snapshot of some of our capital improvement projects. The most expensive is the roof replacement at the high school of about $115,000. But the others are all absolutely essential. We have in the budget 13 placements for special education. They're out-of-district placements. Each of them cost approximately $100,000, roughly.
What does that mean?
So that means we have students that we are unable to program. Their needs are beyond what we have the capacity to support. So we may send them to a Spur Wink, right? Or another type of out-of-district placement. We have 13 in here. We started the budget with 19, that's the need to have actually 19. We have a reserve account of about $300,000 in it for special ed. We are anticipating that we will have to tap into that reserve account this year because of the needs. But we decided that that was a better route versus keeping the money in the budget at this time, given the potential impact on taxpayers. So we are crossing our fingers that we are going to be able to meet all of the students' needs, that we'll have money for all of the out-of-district placements. I mean, I think we just heard last week that we have a kindergartner coming from another neighboring district. They've just decided they're moving to our community, and that district approved an out-of-district placement. So that is not a student that was at all on our radar. So we will have an IEP meeting. We will decide whether we can meet the needs of that particular student. But if not, there is an unanticipated out-of-district placement.
Students go to Margaret Murphy, what it's called, the new school.
We do send students over there to Margaret Murphy. What is nice about that special private school is the location. Oftentimes, when we're providing transportation, if we're transporting a student from here to Lewiston or to Brunswick or wherever it may be, it can cost us almost the same amount in transportation that it costs us in tuition. So to be able to send students right over there, it actually saves us a lot of money. Yeah.
I know that the state reimburses you 100% for those special needs, those special classes. Didn't they? They don't reimburse you?
There's not 100% reimbursement and for anything from the state.
What is the reimbursement for special needs students, and is it a 2-year out kind of?
So special ed is reimbursed 2 years out, but special purpose private schools, you have to be above their base rate. So it depends on how much you spend for the child to see whether the state reimburses us any in the following year. So it's definitely not 100%.
About what would it be if you're doing $100,000 approximate placement cost? What would the state reimbursement be?
I would say that we got maybe $60,000 back in all the monies that we spent this year.
Per student?
No, total. It's
For
right
how
on
many
our.
how many students?
I would say right now, last year, maybe 10. Don't quote me.
So the numbers sort of stay consistent, 10, 13, 15.
So the problem is it needs to be over a certain amount per child. So these children cycle in and cycle out.
Okay.
So if the child is only there for 8 months and doesn't reach that benchmark, then we don't receive any reimbursement for it. So that's the issue that we're having.
Mhm.
Okay. Great question. It's expensive.
And it's a fluid community of all the students, those extra special needs students tend to be more fluid.
Yep.
That's our reimbursement.
So where did we have some reductions? One, because the state now pays for meals for our students, we are no longer having to appropriate money to the budget for the food service program, okay? So as a result, we were able to eliminate that line, about $211,000. Now, should the state change their practice in the future and require local communities to once again pay for meals, then we would have to add that back in. But for the time being, we've decided it was safe to reduce that amount of money.
Does that include staffing that program? the lunch program, is it just the food and the facility, or is it also including the cafeteria workers?
It does not include the workers, it's just the meals. You wanna talk about?
So basically, we're reimbursed right now based on the amount of students we feed. So basically, the state covers the difference between what's not reimbursed to us by the feds. So as Pat was saying, in previous years, our school nutrition program runs in the hole, so to speak. So the district needs additional funds from the district in order to bring the program to zero, to be able to fund the remainder of that program. However, since the state has started paying those meals for students, the program is able to fund itself. And yes, it includes all of our expenditures. The lunch program is its own separate budget and revenue stream. It's not included in what you see here.
We've reduced weekend building checks thanks to some of federal dollars through the ARP grant. We were able to install some monitoring equipment and software in our buildings. So we used to have our head custodians would go into our buildings every Saturday, every Sunday, all year round. Just to make sure that everything was copacetic, right? Everything was fine, we didn't have any issues. So as a result of this software, this technology, we're now going to have them check our buildings once on the weekend between November and the end of March, and the rest of the time it will not. So that was like a $35,000 savings just by doing that. We've already talked about health insurance. We did eliminate a middle school world language teaching position, and we did that in order to maintain a federally funded social studies teaching position. We had, as a result of some staffing reductions due to decline in enrollment, a few years back, we had eliminated some social studies positions. Those were added back in order to lower class sizes through the pandemic. And so now that money is ending. And so we went back to the administration and we're really talking about what our needs are. And the most important was to really be looking at our social studies and having a teacher back so that we have 2 teams of 4 teachers in grade 7 and grade 8. We would have a team of 4 and a team of 3 at the middle school, but that social studies teacher will teach across both teams. Am I saying that correctly?
In grade 6.
In grade 6 only, yeah. But in order to be able to do that without adding money to the budget, we needed to make a reduction. And so the reduction was made in the French program at the middle school. We're really fortunate. We applied for a school revolving renovation fund grant, and we were awarded that so that we can do an asbestos abatement that will be at the high school. It's the cafeteria floor. Those tiles are still asbestos, and it's also the little gym, right? The little gym, that will be done as well. The state will be paying 68.77%, and the rest of the money you took out of this year's budget.
The rest of the money will be placed into a reserve account so that we can pay the bill in the new fiscal year. Yep.
And just to put everyone on notice, this is all new information, that we now have, the bids have come in for the abatement. And in having conversations with the community, with the businesses who are going to be doing this, the high school will be closed. The high school will be closed for 4 to 6 weeks. And it's really the A section that will be closed. So C-Wing I guess we can keep C-Wing open, which will be the social studies English section of the building, and T-Wing. So math and science, we can keep that open, but the center portion of the building, even the main office, is going to have to be closed for a period of time. And it's all about the particles, getting up through the HVAC.
In the summer?
Yes, in the summer. Sorry, I did not say that. Of course, we're closing it down. In the summer, so it will be like the month of July. And it could be towards the end of June once school closes, okay? So just so that everyone is aware. Thank you, Angela. That's an important element.
Before social media.
So here's just kind of a brief summary of the increases and where the decreases fell, that equal the total increase to the budget. I don't know if anyone has questions regarding those.
Yes, what are the main care seat expenditures? Just refresh my memory about that.
So for those students who we place out of district at these special purpose private schools, if those students qualify for main care, those special purpose private schools are able to bill the state for main care. And the state portion actually comes out of the district's state subsidy. So in order to adjust for that, we have to include main care funds. So, and those tend to be, we seem to be spending more every year in those expenditures.
Just another feel-good photo. Gardner Fire Department. And so this is how our budget increases and decreases break down by expenditure articles. Of these, and of the total increase, 4.5% or roughly 1.3 million of that is directly tied to the classroom. That's your regular instruction, your special ed, your other instruction, your student and staff support. Then about 2.4% or 666,000 is for transportation, is for facilities, and then that leaves 0.55% for administration. The other thing that's not in here that I do want to note is ARP funds. We have another year in which to spend some ARP funds. And for next year, we will be using those funds to pay for 2 of our social workers, 2 of our instructional coaches, and a half instructional support person. So we have 1 more year with them under federal funding. It's about $425,000, and then we have to decide what to do after that, right? When that funding dries up. So no decision has been made. So the next, this is the budget, the proposed increase at 6.67%. And the next slide is the estimated impact to taxpayers. Andrea, do you want to chat about that?
So this estimate is prepared based on the form that I'm not sure who, not the city clerk, but the assessor prepares for the state of Maine. It's how your mill rate is calculated. Excuse me, I can't remember the name of the form off the top of my head. So it's based on last year's mill rate. So this is just an estimate that based on the mill rate and valuation as it is currently for the year that is ending, this is the amount that we see impacting each of the 4 communities per 1,000.
Is that a percentage of the mill rate?
So the way that it was calculated is the form that is used includes all of your commitments. And it's your commitments and valuation. So basically what I did is I backed out your commitment for education for last year, and I added your the new amount that we were going to pass along to see how it increased the effect it would have on your mill rate. So per 1,000, and that's just based on, it's just based on your current mill rate, how it would affect. Does that make sense?
And can you speak a little bit about the state valuation? And that increased 6% this year. So if we came in with a 0% increase to the budget, the impact to taxpayers would still be a 6% increase.
So we talked about two different valuations. So the valuation that Pat is talking about is the valuation that the state uses when it calculates our ED 279. So for those of you who don't know what our ED 279 is, it basically establishes our funding from the state. There are two drivers in that cost formula. One is enrollment and the other is valuation. The state, however, does not use the valuations that each of the town uses. Instead, the state has its own valuation for each community, the state valuation. And that is how it bases its ED 279. So based on that, the state decides whether or not to use the lower of last year or a 3-year average. The last few ED 279s we've used has been a 3-year average, as it is this year. So it's a 6% increase in valuation over the last 3-year average valuation. Does that make sense?
So if a town's value is at 95%, and they make an effort to have a reval, and they get up to 100%, that is going to, that's this.
The state valuation is the great equalizer. It's supposed to make up for all of the little anomalies in valuation from one town to the next. I would not guarantee you that if you're at 100% of your valuation that you would equal the state valuation. In fact, I would probably say not. However, if you go to the main revenue website, you will see the state's valuation for each community. And that is what the state uses as it prepares the funding, the ED 279 for each district.
I was just trying to extrapolate out the estimated impact to taxpayers. If in Gardner, for example, it was $1.35 per thousand valuation on the average $200,000 house.
Divide by 1,000 and then multiply what you get by 1.35.
You wouldn't just multiply that by 200 for the 100,000.
So it's per
100.
It's per 1,000. So
Right, so if
the
it's a
valuation.
200,000,
Yep.
you could just multiply by 200, right?
Right.
And that's $270 on that particular $200,000 house.
If it's the 135.
Yes. Well, that's what my little calculator said. 200 times 135 was 270.
I think I have what it.
We did that, you did that
I do.
calculation.
Do you want me to find it?
Yes, I would like you to find it, and I know I have it somewhere in my file as well. I didn't think to pull it out. Oh, yes, I did, it's right here. Okay, so if I live in Gardner and my property is assessed at $250,000, the monthly impact would be $28.13, or the annual impact would be $337.50. In Pittston, the monthly would be $30.63, or $367.50. In Randolph, it would be $31.88 a month, or $382.50 annually. In West Gardner, it would be $20.63 a month, or $247.50 annually.
Now, mind you, that is based on last year's valuation. And I think valuations tend to increase, not decrease. So I would think that would be closer to the worst case scenario.
There's been a new program that the state offered up to us last year that controlled our taxes. How is that going to be impacted by, if you were, what was it, 10 years or 20 years, you were in the same place, you paid
The freezing of evaluation.
Yeah, freezing evaluation, how is that gonna affect, how is that calculated into this? Because supposedly our taxes are not supposed to change. And my understanding is the state's gonna fund that? Not for long, I understand that, but how are you calculating into this if the state is saying you have a program that's, if you participate in it, your taxes are frozen? So how is that factored into this?
So it's my understanding that the taxes are frozen for the homeowner and that the state will pick up the difference. So that should have no bearing on this calculation. And he's right. I don't think the state is going to be able to do this for long because more people enrolled in the program than they originally thought.
You talking the senior program?
Yes.
There are actually two senior programs.
65 plus.
There are two different ones. There's a program that will have the state pay, and I think there's another program that will allow the homeowner to defer taxes until they pass along, and then somebody else who inherits the property is then responsible for the taxes on it. So I don't know which program people enrolled in.
Kathy's a tax collector. Do you have anything you can add?
The tax stabilization program, I don't think I think there's gonna be some changes to it. It wasn't well thought out, it wasn't researched, it was passed, and you've got people that don't need the break applying for it, and the state's not gonna reimburse all of us, they're not. I think it will change probably next year. I think it'll be a one-year thing and then there'll be some sweeping changes made. It was passed accidentally. She signed it and didn't read it and happens, you got all kinds of stuff on your desk, but.
But wouldn't it be other citizens of the town pick up the difference?
It's not my understanding.
If the state doesn't pay it, someone will.
Right.
I'm over 65.
Me too. I propose a large increase this year.
As the tax collector, every year I go to the budget validation meeting at the high school, and there's a handful of people there representing the whole community. There's a handful of people that vote on the budget for the whole community. The problem is getting people involved, getting them to understand the budget. I don't personally think the budget is the problem. I think it's a lack of understanding of what is in the budget for the taxpayers. If people understood the needs in the school, and I was part of the strategic planning conversation, and there's a huge disconnect. People do not understand the needs of today's kids. Financially, for all of us, the problem is some of these children come from homes of parents that are not taxpayers for one reason or another. They have their own issues. But these kids are coming to school dirty. They need help with hygiene before they can even sit down to study. They need to be fed. And people say, put it back to the parents, put it back to the parents. The parents are just not doing it. My husband is a school nurse. He has a shower in his office. He cuts toenails because it hurts the kids' feet to have their shoes, their toenails are like an animal's. It's not one or two kids. It's a good percentage of kids in every school. It's not like when we were in school. It's not at all like that. There are a lot of needs and that costs money. And I hear across the table or at the office, I don't even have a kid in school. Why do I have to pay this? So from my perspective, we need to educate people so that they know what they're voting on. That's a whole different conversation. But there's a big disconnect between the budget and the taxpayer, and we have to bridge the gap somewhere. I always personally believe if people understand, they'll be okay with paying it. If you don't take care of the kids now, you're gonna take care of them later on in life, like it or not. They're our kids, they're our problem as taxpayers. It's not okay, but it's the society that we're living in.
And it's the kids of this generation. Now, my child or my grandchild is not gonna do my back surgery. your child might be doing it, or your child might be doing it, and I wanna be darn sure they know what they're doing. I want the kids educated. Now, I look at this budget and I'm paying taxes that I think could be controlled a little bit better, but not in this area here. You know that Maine is, of the 50 states, Maine is the second lowest paying teachers. Hawaii is only lower than we are. And that's pathetic. It really is. And then my daughter is looking at a different position. Brunswick pays $20,000 more a year for her position than where she is now. So there's something wrong in our system here. And I don't know how to cure that. But I know we need to educate those kids, because when I go down Highland Avenue, I want to make sure the guy that worked on those brakes has been educated.
Especially in January.
Yeah, real quick, how many, I know like when I went to school, I only had one teacher per class in like grammar school. Is there like a standard that we have multiple per students, or?
Depends at what level you're at. In grades 1 through 5, we do have one teacher that will teach all of the core academic programs. Then you have an art teacher, a PE teacher, a music teacher. So you then have those individuals. At the middle school, we have different teachers that will teach us English, social studies, math, and science.
Now, is there like an assistant with those teachers, or they're solely dedicated to that classroom?
They're solely dedicated to that classroom. Now, we do have ed techs, and there are ed techs who may be assigned to support students, certain students who need some support. But that will vary every year, sometimes month to month, and really depending on the needs of the students. It is determined based on the individual needs of the students. So there's no guarantee that you're gonna have an ed tech in your room all the time.
But don't we have a guide, like first grade can only have so many per class?
We do have
I
a
think that was
class
your
size
question.
policy,
What you're
yes.
asking.
Yeah.
Class size
We
policy.
do have a class size policy.
However, I will add, we're on the higher end in most places on the class size policy of students to teacher. Our specialists, like art, music, PE, are sharing buildings in almost every grade level, including high school. So we have specialists that are commuting throughout the day in order to, and so they're serving 500 students so that we can maintain a leaner budget and still provide the services that we need to provide. So it's definitely, I've come from other districts, it's, there's no extra. But, and I know it's hard to believe that coming from, you don't know who I am, but I've been to a lot of other districts, and I'd say that we're pretty scrupulous at how people spend their time and making sure they're with the students as much as absolutely possible.
So we were trying to keep this to an hour, so I'm gonna try to move us forward. I have some additional information I think that will help here.
How did the percentage change from last budget year of the 53.30% in the state?
Do you remember what it was last year?
Keep going and I will.
She will get back to you, okay?
Thank you.
So looking at the next slide, this is just the breakdown of where we spend, how we spend. Again, 71% of our entire budget is directed towards the classroom, okay? Moving us forward, this is small, this next one, but I hope you can see it. And what we tried to do is we've really tried to compare what we spend per pupil based upon expenditure article compared to other schools in Kennebec County, right? So we're not going down to the coast, where their demographics are different, or down to Brunswick. We're really looking at Kennebec County. And as you can see, as you look through here, MSAD11 is the lowest, spends the lowest per pupil at $12,846. These are using state figures. These are not our figures. We go to the Department of Maine website and we pull these figures from there. The state is spending on an average of $16,248. So we have like Fairfield, Winslow, Oakland, Oak Hill, Skowhegan, Waterville, Veronica, Augusta, Halldale, and RSU 12. Right, so RSU 12 is next door in Chelsea. The difference for them, I'm going to show you some other numbers, is keep in mind they don't have a high school. So when it comes to like student and staff, no. When it comes to other instruction, which really looks at extracurricular, co-curricular, their numbers are going to be considerably lower than ours because they don't have high school.
Did you find it? So in response to his question, it was 55.18% last year that the state contributed to our budget.
Any idea why the reduction?
So the state creates a budget for us based on our students, the number of students we have. So if our budget increases, the locals end up picking up more. Does that make sense?
So looking at the next slide, this is pretty basic. I was just trying to make this fit in the slide. I wanted you to see what the base rate is, or the base scale for a teacher in our area. So we're at 40,128 this year. And you can see we're pretty competitive for the most part. Augusta just settled, they're much higher. RSU 75 is higher. But at the top of the scale, when you start looking at some of these amounts, that we have teachers that live in Waterville that drive to us. RSU 75 that drive to us, RSU 1, you know, just as Jane said, we can make considerably more somewhere else. So I just thought that would be helpful so you can kind of see what we're talking about. Back to comparisons. Thought that this might help. How do we compare across the state with what we spend per pupil? There are 257 school districts across the state. And so tried to rank them in total per pupil expenditures, and we ranked 218. So that means only 39 school districts spend less than we do per pupil. With special education, we have 86 school districts that spend less than we do. But if you go back to the graph that I showed you before, in Kennebec County, we spend the least amount per student for special education. For system administration, only 31 districts spend less than we do. For student and staff support, 178 spend less than we do. That includes social workers, nurses, librarians, curriculum, technology. And again, we have 4 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school. Because we have so many schools, we're duplicating our services, which is why that's a bit higher. Then facilities and maintenance. We have 125 that spend less than we do. We rank at 132. We take care of our facilities, right? So we're right in the middle. But what if we really looked at how much other school districts spend per pupil? If we were to spend the same amount as the state average, we'd be adding $4.2 million to our budget. If we spend as much as RSU 2 in Hollowell, Farmingdale, we'd be adding $4.1 million to our budget. If we spend as much as RSU 4, which is in Litchfield, Sabatis, Wales, we'd be adding close to $1.7 million to our budget. RSU 12 in Chelsea area, we'd be adding $500,000. Again, keeping in mind they don't have a high school, so there's some additional cost associated with a high school that they don't have. In Augusta, they do spend less than we do. And they spend less than we do partly because they went through and they consolidated all of their schools. And as a result of consolidating their schools, they are able to reduce all of those duplication of services. So thought that just kind of puts it a little bit in perspective. We still have needs. I think, you know, this district is taking care of our facilities pretty well, but we still have things that we need to keep in mind. We need to pave our parking lots, especially if you've been at the high school, right? You know that we need to pave parking lots. We need new gym floors at our elementary schools. The high school, we need bathroom renovations, locker room renovations, catwalk needs to be redone, and outdoor track. All of that costs a lot of money, and we just haven't been able to afford it. Finance met the other day and they have directed the administration to begin doing some preliminary work to find out the feasibility of a consolidated elementary school. What would that even look like if we were to pursue it? You know, what size lot would you have to have? How many acres? What would be the size of the building? Just some of those general pieces of information to share with them. So we will do that work over the summer and report back to the board. Just another highlight from the middle school, one of their fun middle school dances. And then a little bit from adult education. I will say to Josh Farr, who is the director, I am just amazed at how many individuals he continues to get through the CNA program. Oh, I did CAN, didn't I? Ignore that. That's CNA.
None of us caught that. We can
Might have
spell
auto-
can.
It might have autocorrected.
Yeah, gosh, it's really impressive at how many people they run through that program.
Josh can get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, the next one is something I want to put on your radar. LD 974. I want to bring this to your attention. This is really a big deal. This LD just came out of the Education Committee with an ought to pass unanimously. And what it is supposed to do is to increase salaries for some of our hourly staff. And trust me, I support them receiving a livable wage. They work really hard. They are in that classroom side by side with those students, where they're driving our buses, they're delivering our food. We could not do what we do without these exceptional people. So I have to really emphasize how important that is. What this bill would do, however, is it would take minimum wage and it would, it would take minimum wage and they would do a calculation of 200% of minimum wage beginning 24-25, which would have our ed techs going from $16 an hour to $27.60. That $16 an hour is for someone with a high school diploma. They don't need to have anything beyond just a high school diploma. We have support staff, which would be our custodians, bus drivers, everyone else. They would receive $150,000 of minimum wage, or at 20.70. Right? So again, that would boost, while it would boost custodians, the reality is it's going to boost everyone else, right? If there's a $10 gap between an individual who's now going to get $27.60 or existed with the $16.07, they're going to want that same differential moving forward. So Andrea has already determined that if anyone receiving less than $27.60 or anyone receiving less than $20.70 were to get a raise, and we did not increase anyone else's pay, we just left it as is, we would be adding $563,000 to the budget for that alone. The reality is it will increase these other salaries. So it's going to be closer to a $1.26 million impact to the budget if this passes. A new teacher on the salary scale for 24-25 with a bachelor's degree will make $32.62 an hour. So we're going to have someone with a high school diploma making $27.60 and a teacher who is fully certified making only $4 more an hour, $4.50 an hour.
And they both get 100% health benefits.
And they get 100% out, right, single coverage, right?
Have you reached out to the folks in the legislature that represent our communities? Were they invited tonight?
Today, that information was made available to me. That is absolutely my intent to reach out. Again, it's well intended. People want to compensate some of the lowest paid individuals a reasonable salary. We all want that. It's just to go from $16 an hour to get an $11 an hour raise in 1 year. There is also an LD out there to increase teacher pay. We just got to the 40,000. There is another LD that would increase to 50,000 by 2028. That would be done in a similar fashion, a 3-year ramp up, right? Like was done for the 40,000. This, as I understand it, will just be here. Communities, you need to cover the cost for this increase. And it doesn't take into account different demographics across the state. You know, in Kittery, you might need 2760, but in Calais, those demographics don't necessarily recall the same or require the same starting wage. So we have been in contact with Maine Municipal. I have a letter I will be sending out to our legislators, members of the Appropriations Committee, but I would encourage others to also contact your legislators.
At one time, if the state passed any expenditures that were state mandates, and I don't know if this would fall in that category or not, that they had to be funded at the state level. So do you know anything about that with this particular bill?
I do not. This would be an
That would be a good question.
unfunded mandate.
Right, so that'd be a good question to ask.
Yeah, but at this point, it's my understanding it's going to the full legislature. It is not going to the Appropriations Committee.
Everything goes to the Appropriations Committee.
Well,
It's gotta come out of the budget. and that's-
Eventually, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where it'll have to go.
so that's what I know. I certainly will be going out to our legislators and I would encourage you to.
And I
do
think
the
later
same.
this afternoon, there was more information about that, but
Okay.
I will talk with municipal management tomorrow, but they were getting some more clarity about that this afternoon, after you had your meeting this morning.
Yeah, because the other challenge is that moving forward,
Crazy.
the increase is based on CPI. It'll be based on CPI that is determined in June. And the new rate would go into effect in January. Here we are in May, we're finishing our budget. So we will not be in a position where we'll actually be able to budget a real increase, right? We won't know what that number is until after the budget's been approved by taxpayers. So that's a bit of a challenge for us. Yep. Oh, I was gonna say, the last thing I have, and I'm gonna turn this over to Angela, because Angela's just been sitting here listening. Strategic listening report. We have finished that process of listening, holding lots of strategic listening groups. We've received incredible feedback. And we just had the report presented to the school board last Thursday night. So I provided a little bit of information here. And Angela, do you want to review it?
So the full report is available on our website. So if you go onto our website, under school board, you'll be able to find the full report. It's really interesting because the listening sessions were recorded. And so many of the quotes are extracted from the listening sessions, and you can actually have more of an interactive experience in the report than just reading a set of pages. You'll get a better feel about the 4 stakeholder groups, which included high school students, staff at all levels, all roles, all positions, all levels, and families and community members. And it was a multiple month process of securing interest and engagement. And every session was recorded and then distilled. And so the 4 themes that came out were highly interconnected across all 4 stakeholder groups. So that's really unique for a community, that all groups actually ended up saying the same thing. With some exception around student mental health challenges, the community representation was unaware of the significance of our student mental health challenges. So that was just the one major discrepancy. But the need and request for continued school and community collaboration, evolving curriculum instruction, so having more flexibility, relevancy, connection to adult life. So that's something that we've already been responding to and plan to respond to in greater detail. Responding to student mental health challenges, we've really worked on that over the last few years, but it is a rising challenge. And then educator sustainability with increased challenges, continued requirements on what we teach and when we teach it, and a real commitment by our educators to build relationships with their students and families. We're, needing to be really conscientious of burnout. And we have planned and predicted increase in retirements over time. We are so fortunate. I've never worked in a district where we've had people really come and spend their lifetime in this district. They went through school here, and they work here, and they're raising their children here, and those children are coming back. And that's also what came out of the listening session, is that we're so fortunate to have a real cyclical, multi-generational group of communities. All 4 communities are represented that way. There's a lot of pride in that, and we really want to leverage that and continue to support that. But we also have to think about the sustainability of that. And so those themes are available for you to dig into and learn more about. The administrative team has been given an opportunity by the board to kind of look at that more deeply over the summer and sort of develop some recommendations that we feel like we can respond to, and the board will then take that into consideration as they develop their strategic plan. So this is just the listening report that will ground the future plan. But as you can see, their schools are central to the community, but it was clear in the messaging that we need the community to also take a significant role in supporting the growth and development of our youth. It's a partnership.
Absolutely is. And that's the presentation. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit over, and I certainly want to open it up to questions, comments. Rusty.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you've done on this. And I'm gonna be the devil's advocate. I have great deal of respect for you and everyone in this room, but the first thing Becky said tonight was that we're here for the kids, which tonight we are, but all of the elected officials in this room are here for our taxpayers and residents in the community. We have to think of that too. With that being said, I look at the budget numbers, everybody's expenses are up. Utilities, fuels, salaries, insurances, all the towns, the city, they're all the same. We're all looking at those increases. Sitting on the council I'm on, we have worked very hard, and the employees in the city have worked very hard to keep those rises, those costs at a minimum, as I know that the school district has as well. But I look at the city of Gardner, we're looking at a 20-cent increase to the taxpayers instead of $1.35, I think it is for the school. A couple of things, I look, and I understand, I graduated 35 years ago. A long trip for us on a sporting event was Skowhegan, Mount Blue, Oxford Hills. That was a long trip. We're going to Holton or Skyle. There's got to be something looked at. That's ridiculous to travel that far. I understand those are small numbers, but those small numbers add up to savings. I don't know who sets up those schedules. I don't know how that works, and I apologize for that. I'm ignorant to that fact, but it's got to be looked at. I know you're looking at consolidating into one elementary school, which would obviously take years. I imagine Gardner is so far down on the list or help state aid for that because of the new buildings we have that I don't know that I'd live long enough to see that happen. But I don't object to looking at, seeing, and I understand if you had one building, you have one principal. There were the days when schools shared principals. I understand we're in different times and that is tough, but we may have to look at that. The costs just can't keep going the way they are. And I know you've worked very hard to keep them in a minimum. I see that and I respect that. I have a daughter that's a teacher in this district. I want to see you succeed and I want her to have a job and my grandchildren will go to this district. I just think we can't keep passing these numbers on to the taxpayers. And I know I'm probably being glared at right now and that's okay, but I was elected to do a job and I have to think of everybody, you know, and I agree, Becky, we are here tonight for these kids. And my kids went here and got a wonderful education. I'm very thankful for that. And I want to see that for every child. But I also look at what we've done on the Gardner City Council. I can't speak to the other towns, but the cuts that we've had to make, the concessions we've had to make. I know Kathy could use at least 2 more people in her front office, at least. She's not getting them. All of our front office people down there have taken on more responsibility because we've had to eliminate positions. I'm sorry, but I just think more of that thought has to happen in many aspects. And again, I'm not saying you haven't done a great job and worked hard on this because I see what you came up with originally was 13% or whatever that was. And like you said, that wasn't sustainable, but 6% is a big increase too. When all of our towns are looking at the same increases you have. Now, I understand kids that need IEPs, those things, that doesn't affect it. It doesn't happen in the towns. It does affect the towns because it affects our taxes, but those things are special to the school district. I understand there are things that aren't, but again, some of the traveling we do, I guess I need someone to explain that to me, and I apologize for being ignorant on that, but I just don't get how we can have to drive 4 or 5 hours for a sporting event when we could play that event a half an hour from here. It just needs to be looked at.
That's all driven by the Maine Principals Association. And they decide who we're gonna play at different times. So I am not the expert on that. That is certainly a question for Nate, but it is driven by the Maine Principals Association.
Nate needs to take these comments to the Maine Principal Association and share them. And if I'm wrong, please, people tell me I'm wrong. I'd be happy to be wrong, but because I think there are things we are gonna, even though they're not preferable, having to share principals. I know that's not preferred, but it may come to having to do that.
But the real challenge is when we start talking about the student mental health issues. You know, we had, I think it was last year, we had a kindergarten student blow out a window on day 1, right? It is not uncommon for us, well, that is an anomaly, okay, that is not something that typically does happen. We do have much more frequent behavioral issues. And we have principals that are just running from, trying to manage their building, trying to address instructional needs and take care of some of these behavioral issues. At a time, yes, there were sharing of principals. I don't know if we could even keep a principal nowadays if we asked them to share. It just isn't manageable because you're always in the wrong spot when someone needs you, right? So, I would look to board members who've been a part of this to respond. I know that we've looked long and hard, and we are talking about next year already. Okay, let's start thinking about these enrollments. If these enrollments continue to decline, what can we do differently? Is there anything that we can do differently and reevaluate the staffing levels that we have, reevaluate how we do things, so that there could potentially be a cost savings in a way that we just haven't been able to get at yet. I would look to administer board members first. Or
I'll say, yeah, I think Rusty, I said the same exact thing you did in our first initial budget presentation, where I said there's no way we can do this to the taxpayers. This can't happen. And then through the whole process, when we got to the 6%, I even sat down and said, all right, let's look at these increases again. Where in these increases can we make some change? And when I look at this sheet right here, salaries are salaries. They're already collectively bargained. You can't, you can't really change those at this point. Main pairs, if you go down through all the heat, electricity, those are all fixed costs. So then I said, all right, so what are we doing compared to other districts that we could maybe shave some money. So I went to the cost per pupil section. I looked at that chart and went down through everything we were spending per kid, and we were spending less than everybody else. So I said, okay, so I can't, where am I gonna cut there? So I know through the finance committee and the board, constantly looked at where we could shave some money off this budget because, well, we get it everywhere. This is just the school budget. You got the municipal budget, you got the county budget. This is one small piece of what everybody's gonna see in their tax bill next year. And I will say that we worked very hard to see how much we could get out of this, because 6% is a lot. But I also know there's other school districts that are working it far worse. I know that there's a town close to us, that entire town budget went up 48%. But yeah, I mean, you see the numbers, it is, I guess it's there, but.
Yeah, I'll just share a little piece of the same conversation we had at the finance committee, which I think if you look at the budget increase, decrease by expenditure article, that's probably the most telling one for me. If you sort of go down and keep an eye on both the total amount being increased, but also the percentage increase. Special education, up 10%, $500,000. That we have to do that. We cannot do that. Transportation, 276,000, 14%. That's inflation driven. Facilities and maintenance, up 11%. That's inflation driven. Regular instruction, 2.8%. Overall inflation was a heck of a lot more than 2.8% this year. We're doing less for our students than we did previously. So this hurts. I get that. It's going to hurt everybody, but this is an inflation-driven scenario. And if we take it out of the kids, we're asking the kids to pay for the inflation that everybody's experiencing. I don't think that's the right thing to do in this moment. That just kicks the can down the road for problems with those kids later in life who don't get the same quality. I would suggest that folks up at the state and the federal level really consider how they can do tax abatement, long-term debt management. The district has to do a budget year over year. We can't amortize this out 30 years to smooth the bumps out, but other folks can. So I'd encourage you to look through it with that kind of lens.
I would add that school funding is the most restricted of any funding, federal or state. We live in a very, very, very tight box. If the budget passes, the line that's in the budget, that's what we can spend. We cannot spend 1 penny more than what the voters have said, yes, you can spend. Another thing, Pat and I have this conversation all the time. I wish that the rest of the board knew what she does and knew what the other administrators in our buildings do. It looks very peaceful when you drive by, but inside there's often inside the minds and hearts of our children is a world of chaos, and that chaos gets lived out within the buildings. There is no possible way that we could share an administrator. I'm not rolling my eyes at you, Rusty. I would love to go back to a time when we didn't need what we need, but we need it. And our kids we're just so great at hiding it. And not intentional at hiding it. We're just so great at looking peaceful. But that underbelly of unrest is real. And it's alive and well and festering in our children, and not just our children, but everybody's children. And in order to provide a place that is safe for them, where they can act out these things and get the help that they need, that's what we do, as well as trying to educate them so that they can be your back surgeon or your brain surgeon or your plumber or your roofer, and that they can be depended on and be safe. That's what we do. But I'm with you. I might be a more socially liberal person, but I am a fiscal conservative person, and I don't want to spend more money than we need to. And we have combed this over and over, and I can't imagine where we would take money. And Colin, you're absolutely right. The 2.8%, that one number, that's pretty impressive. Everything else is driven by inflation that we have no control over. Just like we have no control over the state valuation that started us on the 6th floor, as opposed to, so it makes it look like a 12% increase when it's really a 6%. I mean, we just there are things we have no control over.
I do think, though, if you want to vote of confidence that Pat and Andrew and the rest of the team have really done their due diligence, it's worth noting that our district's the only one not carrying a debt load.
Correct.
You know, they have well-managed budgets for years and years, and that's an important
I've lived
thing.
here my
to
whole
know.
life and I know that.
Yeah.
But I also know we cannot continue to pass on this type of increase to the taxpayers of these communities. I don't know the answer, but we've got to look at some other ways, I guess. I don't know.
And that's why we're looking at what we're looking at this summer.
Right, and I said, I don't object to it. My fear
Have no
is,
idea.
yeah, we don't know until you look. I understand that. I'm
You
all
have to
for
ask
it.
all the questions.
Yeah,
Have you thought about daily transportation? Going out to Pittston, there's 4 trips out to pick up the high school kids, come back in, go back out again, pick up the elementary kids, come back in. And that's what, 10 miles one way at least, 10 miles back in. That's 40 miles for one run, 80 miles a day for both runs. If we could had schools all starting at the same time, departing, you know, with different, as I do now with the middle school. All those kids, now people say, oh, you have kindergarten kids on there with kids in the that are juniors in high school. Well, that happens in families, and it happens at the grocery store, and it happens at the bowling alley, and it happens at the Pittston Fair. Kids are kids, and they have to learn to socially be acceptable. Now, if we do have extremes on buses, I would say, have a bus monitor. It's cheaper than running 80 miles every day on a bus route. Have you seen the buses?
So that analysis, we won't talk about it tonight, but that was done. That work was done.
Yes.
A few years ago.
Yeah,
That
I
was
did
led by
that
Angela.
my second year here, and we actually can't run a single bus run. We've tried. We don't have enough staff, enough buses to run, to get to all the parts of our district and get back in time. And we have a
reduced-
software who's helped us do that as
I
well.
think we've cut 3 or 4.
We've consolidated, Gabe can tell you, we've consolidated a lot of runs already to, which is actually making our kids be on a bus for an hour every morning and every afternoon in order to save on transportation costs.
And we do have software that maximizes our runs that we run, routing software for our buses, so that helps us to save.
Kathy, do you swear to tell the truth? So help you God?
I don't have a problem with the budget per se. I think we all have to work together to get the information to the taxpayers, because they're the ones that are impacted. We have to get the information to them. It's their money. For whatever reason, the timeline is very short between the validation meeting and the election. The clerk world, I've been involved, but this is my first year as the clerk. It's mind-boggling to me, and I don't know if you read our post on the website. If I was the taxpayer, I would be saying WTH. I can issue you an absentee ballot, but you can't vote it until the day after the budget validation meeting. There's nothing to vote on until the validation meeting.
Right.
There's a week of time. If I wait and send out ballots, a week's turnaround. I don't know about you, but I get mail twice a week now. I can't mail people ballots and have them get it back to me timely. So I have to send their ballot out, but I have to say to them, don't vote it and don't send it back to me until the day after. That's confusing for a lot of people. It feels like we need more time. Like I said, I don't have a problem with the budget. I'm a big supporter of the school. I'll vote yes to the budget. My problem is I feel like the voters are disenfranchised through the process. That's what keeps me awake at night. I don't know how to fix that, but I think that's our responsibility. The voters can decide whether or not they want to pay that money, but they need to know what they're paying. And they need time to process it and think about it. I believe in my heart of hearts, most people will be okay if they understand where the money's going, but they don't. Most people don't even know that you guys do the budget. They think the city does this.
Yeah.
And trust me, when the bill goes out, I hear it. I hear it nonstop. I just don't know how to fix it.
Gary, and then
I think what the taxpayers are confused about is, all they see is numbers. They don't know what's in those numbers. So those numbers, the big numbers, could be full of stuff that they don't even know what they're voting on. So I think that's what's confusing. And I agree with him. I'm from a town that's got little over 1,700 people in our town. And probably half, 3/4 are elderly people. And we don't have a school. And our budget's higher.
We have
Which I
3,000
don't understand.
voters and less than 500 vote on this budget.
Yeah. I think if the taxpayers knew what these numbers stand for, what was in it, you'd have more people at those meetings
Yes.
to vote.
So how do
And I think that changed. I think that these numbers would change, and you would find ways to make that number smaller for these communities. And our towns are all on fixed income. So $300 some odd to an elderly person with a home, and the school budget's always going up every year. I've been on the school book, on the selectmen for over 10 years now, and probably a couple of years I've seen the school budget going down. But from here, it's gone up every single year. And our town's it's gonna be a bombshell one of these years. And I know it's for the kids, but we gotta think of the people in the communities that support MSAD11.
Yeah, has the school board ever taken like an opportunity to have an open forum when we do this for the residents to kind of come in and maybe have their representatives from each town along with maybe some other members of the school board to kind of have a little educational opportunity for them? And this is new to me, so I'm kind of learning here, but
Hold meetings at each school. Advertising with PTA and everyone else, and sometimes we get maybe 3 people.
not many, yeah.
People just attend.
Yeah.
But to your point, the pandemic allowed for us to get all this equipment, all this streaming equipment. Every single
Yeah.
thing we do is live streamed and it's on our website. So if anybody wants to know what the 2.8 is, they can go in and watch all of our finance meetings, policy meetings, curriculum. Every meeting we have is public.
Yeah,
And it's live streamed.
I know
will
for
tell
me,
you,
I'm
just from talking to taxpayers, what I hear back from people, when I say things like that, it's on the website, we stream this, a lot of them don't even have access to a computer.
For me, I like to think I'm a little old fashioned, I'd like to just kind of sit down and have a meeting like this instead of sit and look at a television, and listen to someone talking to me through there. So I don't know, just that opportunity, I think maybe would help. I'm not sure, but.
But I can remember going to those school meetings, and you're right, 3 people show up, and there are 3 people that have been involved with the school.
The same 3 people that do everything. Yes. Pat and then Gay.
Pat, have you guys ever thought about on your insurance? I know how many employees do you employ, MSAD11?
About 435.
Out of that 435, they all get free health insurance,
No.
full-time, they all full-timers get free health insurance.
Get, those who are eligible for health insurance, they receive 100% single coverage. Everything beyond that is 70%. And we are probably, I think there's only one other school district that contributes as a similar amount to us. One of the challenges, I talked about the salary, the other challenge has to do with benefits. There are school districts that pay 95% of everything beyond 100% or 80% or 90%. We are one of the lowest school districts that contributes towards health insurance.
And then,
The state of Maine used to be that way. When I first started with the state back in '87, my insurance was free, I had to pay for my wife. But now, everyone has to pay a percentage. Have you ever thought about that? Save money for the taxpayers?
We thought about it, but we wouldn't keep our employees because they can go anywhere and get 100% paid and.
Same way, it all worked out. It's a change. Did you ever presented that to your employees? It's a union thing. The union probably said you probably lose employees.
We would lose employees. We would lose employees.
Period. Don't you have trouble in filling all positions already?
Right now, we have challenges with filling ed tech positions. I see bus driver positions. And we are definitely shorthanded with special education. Can't tell you off the top of my head. Do you know we have probably 5 special ed positions that are not filled yet for next year? Maybe even more than that. Last year, we had 2 unfilled audio on.
We actually took guidance out of, elementary guidance out of the budget, in part because we couldn't find any people to apply for the positions, which is partly why we segued over to social workers, because the student need is still there, but if you can't find people to fill them, and you had your hand up, so yes.
So
Pat.
I would just like to offer, I'd be happy to meet with Craig Hickman and Karen Montel. I think the source of a lot of our mutually shared grief and burden is from decisions that are made in Augusta that get put on our shoulders. You know, DOT has cut back what they will pay, so then we have to pay for half the roads. The gentleman mentioned the taxation debacle that's going on. It's good for the people in it, but everybody else is gonna have to pick up what the state doesn't pick up. All those solar panels that are going in, they're not paying taxes.
Right.
Just so we're clear, I'm gonna say it again, they are not paying taxes. Those smaller farms, the ones that are, they look big, but they're considered small. The state has promised that they will reimburse the municipalities 50%, but I doubt we'll see that. I think that's so we have all these different things coming at us, just like you do. And I think it's time to paint a picture to our elected officials. They make these decisions. This is what happens to the retired people in our poor communities. That's whose shoulders it goes on. Even if their taxes are frozen, it's still, you know, it's still built up over the years, and then it gets pushed on the younger families. And then you lose your population of students, right? It all matters. So I'd be happy to meet with them.
With you. Gay and then Chris.
Well, as some of you may know, I've sat in about every chair now. Now I'm newly at the municipal level. I've been at the state level. I sat on the school board. And I sat on the school board in the 90s when we went from a budget meeting at which about 26 people came. 25 of them were teachers. We voted in the budget and we all went to the school concert afterwards. And in the 90s, when there was a downturn, there was some ugly, ugly meetings. And some people in these communities forced the school budget to go to a district-wide vote. And the theory behind that was more people would be involved, more people would be aware, and more people would have a say on the vote, on the budget. I would say that the faces in this room may have changed, but the issues have not.
Right.
And I think you're doing a great job tonight having this meeting. We never did that before. And I think Kathy's point about letting people know, when you put together your information for your voters, when you put out your district-wide budget, your budget newsletter that you do, I can't remember, do you include things like the property tax fairness credit and ways that seniors and others who are struggling with their taxes can reduce their tax burden or get reimbursed for their tax burden?
No, they decided.
That would be a good thing, because that would help alleviate some of the stress. Because the reality is the people over 65 who are on fixed incomes are not going to be paying this burden. They're going to get that back if they file an income tax and get that property tax fairness credit back. But I wanted to go back to something earlier. You look at this budget increase overview and you look at the drivers behind that budget. 64%, using my crude math, 64% of your budget increases are based on salaries and benefits and employment taxes. 30% are driven by out-of-district placements. There was a time when that was 100% paid by the state. It was reimbursed 2 years down the road, but it was 100% dollar for dollar reimbursed. The theory behind it was that all of those children with those extraordinary special needs that we all agree need to be addressed were considered all of our children statewide. And so the pool of funds was from a larger source than just individual districts. That was supposed to alleviate this thing that happens when a special needs child moves into your neighborhood. We don't want people to start groaning and saying, oh no, that's gonna make my taxes go up. That was supposed to ameliorate that concern. So that's one of the things that I would suggest we bring up with state leaders. I haven't been out of the legislature that long. And as far as I knew, those weren't 100% reimbursed. So those real numbers need to be shown to those folks. So I just give you credit for what you've done. There's not much left that you can cut, but I also agree with Rusty. The buck has to stop somewhere. And I think we need to let folks know that there are programs available to them They're not gonna lose their homes because the school budget goes up. But you do need to communicate to people what went into it, like you're communicating with us tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gail.
Just piggybacking on what these people said, and Rusty, I do agree that it's hard to go back to the taxpayers with that big of an increase. One thing to remember is what Superintendent Hopkins said, and this is good for the board members to bring back to the communities, that if we had a 0% increase, no increase to wages, no increase to benefits, no increases to, there would still be an increase to all the towns. And that's based on the state's evaluation. And that's something that we can't control. So half of this increase that you're getting is due to the state's evaluation of the community. And so even if we came in flat, you're still gonna see something. So I think that's.
No, it's the first time I've heard that.
Right.
I heard it said and I didn't hear it.
So, and we broke down, it's not what.
That's, actually, it's incorrect.
Isn't that what she said?
She did, but if everything remained the same, we are receiving about 435,000 more this year than we did last year. It would reduce by 435,000, regardless of the shift in valuation.
Okay, but the reevaluation had a big impact on what the
did-
communities are paying.
It
State's
did,
valuation,
but it
yes.
would still be an overall reduction of 435,000. It was
Right.
something that was said in a finance meeting.
Okay.
That stuck in my head, that didn't sound right. And
It'd
then
still
I
be
corrected
right.
myself in a
Right.
future meeting.
But it'd still be a reduction of 400,000.
Mhm.
So therefore, we're still getting $400,000 less. So you're still gonna, even if we cut this down more, we're still gonna receive less from the state this year. So that's a driving factor of why the municipalities are seeing more, a 12% increase in West Gardner and not 6, like what the school is, and so on and so forth. But I don't know what the answer is either. It's hard.
I can just jump in a little bit too. Excuse me, I'm stopping. I think it's
No, I just wanted to clarify what she said.
They make me cough in this
No, you're
voice.
fine.
just that, Rusty, I think it's a great point and a great, where does it stop? And, I keep coming back to we're like the leanest district in the state, or one of the leanest districts. And we have been for a long time, actually. And that's why, the buildings may not change anytime soon, because we do a great job of keeping them up, right? I hear let's watch the pennies and let the dollars take care of themselves side of that. I think we're always looking for that. That part, like, as I've been on the school board and followed the budget process more and more. So I'm not on the finance committee, but we're encouraged to attend, and we do almost as a board, especially since March, right? As soon as it starts, we just dive in and we go over this at, the millions of dollars, and then the, $20 a month thing, so we're going up and down to look at the costs, and then look as granularly as we can at the cost per building and cost per pupil, and what it means if we cut here and cut there. So, I don't know, maybe that's cold comfort, but there's definitely been, many people looking at this for many hours and days to come up with this. And, the administrators are always working on this all the time. So I'm just mindful that, the other thing is that we've talked about, how do we get this message to the voters?
Right. What's the way?
We always talk about it, and this year we've really been how do we convey what we're doing about this is an investment in our communities, right? And I know it's different when folks are retired and the income is in one spot, and the investment in the community, that kid's not gonna be a surgeon for another 25 years or whatever, right? We're not gonna see it that way, so it's harder to gauge. But I know actually, it's funny for me, driving through town, and I see people, walking with kids that I don't know, and I used to know all the people with all the little kids. And it's, a nice feeling, right? Oh, people like it here. People want to come here and raise their kids here. So I'm really hopeful that even though we do have an increase, and I know, and definitely I thought about it as a taxpayer too, that's not the only reason I'm making a decision on this budget, and I do support this budget, but I'm thinking of it how is this affecting my kitchen table? And I think a lot of us are. It's a real It really impacts all of us. So, you know, that's the reason I can really get behind it, is because I know we've done the work on it and I can see what it connects to. And I can see we're staying true to being the leanest district in Kennebec County.
Please don't think I don't recognize the work you've done.
Yeah, no, I hear that, man. Thank you. Yeah.
And secondly, it's great that we're the leanest, one of the leanest districts, but it's awful that we're one of the leanest.
I know, it's a double-edged sword, right?
No, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
We want to be thrifty, not cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
I do recognize the work you folks have done. I truly do.
Rusty, we're not taking it in a bad way at all. No, I honestly, when I first saw it at the first finance meeting, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is very bad news. And it really is, it's shocking. And Gay, you're right, the special needs students, and we have to take care of them. We have to take care of every student, but most especially those students of those families that it's so stressful anyway, you know, that we just have to do our very best, and it's expensive. Yes, Kathy?
I think you have to market yourself. You know, a few years ago at the budget validation meeting, Karen Moody had prepared a slideshow with statistics, and I cried all the way home, finding out what was happening at LER. People don't know.
No.
And that's the information they need. I keep saying it, I believe if people understood what's happening in these schools, they would be okay. They would understand the increase, but they don't know what's happening. You drive by LER, it's a beautiful little school. Kids are out playing on the playground. People don't know there's a padded room, a safe room. They don't know how many kids go there that have a parent in jail or a parent that overdosed. You know, my husband, the little school that he works at, a kindergartners, the set of twins, their mother committed suicide, and the boy came 2 days later because he didn't want to miss the field trip. That's all he has left. These kids, there's percentage-wise, the kids that come from a home with two parents that both work, and, you know, they're very few and far between.
I presented that Karen Moody data at the legislature to the Ed Committee and the Appropriations Committee that year. But that's information that we should have, and we should
That's what the
continue.
taxpayers need to
Yeah,
see.
we
They
need to
need
continue to share
all of that data so that they can take it in and absorb it. They're just driving by the school.
And it looks peaceful and lovely.
And new.
And new. And it's 30
They
plus
need
years
to know
old.
I know you can't violate people's confidence, but they need to know the numbers, the statistics of what's happening, and then they'll connect the dots.
And it's just really well hidden. Everything looks just so lovely and peaceful and calm. And it's
shocking
It's
when you find out.
shocking when you know, yeah, the number of students that have seen a parent die or seen the things that our kids have seen that are nothing like.
Many of us haven't seen.
That we have not seen. And
We
it's
live
and
very
it's-
sheltered lives when you find out what these
and
kids
it's
are
nothing
going
like
through.
Ukraine, but it's our form of terror and our form of damage, and it's valuable and it's meaningful, and that's why we're here. Jack, you had your hand up, I think.
See if I can remember.
I'm so sorry. Was it like a year ago?
First, I think it's a really fantastic idea that we take the pervasive issues higher to places where they're potentially in a position to change the system in such a way that this isn't such a painful process for us. I think that's a fantastic idea. And also, I know that I know that it's alarming and painful when the tax situation goes up, especially when it goes up a significant amount all at once. But the flip side of us having been so diligent in making sure our district runs lean is that when we have extraordinary changes in cost, like we've all been experiencing, there's not an easy way for us to soften the blow. So when you're like, we have to stop this, we can't keep doing this. Like the school board in making the budget is in a position where we can't fix it without exterior help. So it's like we took it very, very seriously, the effects that this would have on every single person that lives in our community. But without, we can't make it better without doing serious disservice to our students in the now, and then also to the surprise of the taxpayers in a future year when we're stuck in the same situation of needing to raise the assessment in order to keep the doors open. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Can I add something back?
Yes.
I know that this administration, meaning the Mills administration, is very pleased with itself, and it should be. They've done a lot of wonderful things for children, including providing free breakfast and free lunch. They're very proud of the 55% that they provide to districts. However, what should be stated is the 55% that they provide isn't the actual amount of the cost of education for districts. It's the cost of education through their funding formula. And their funding formula has been deemed inadequate by an outside PICUS review. So at the end of the day, there's a pie, and the pie size remains the same, and the pieces from year to year just change. And as I said, 55% is better than where we have ever been before, but it is not properly addressing the needs that we currently have in our school districts. And this funding formula it's what we have, but it's not adequate.
And it's not only what we have, it's what we're mandated to use. So.
I think a lot of all the troubled students that we have, our students are wonderful, but have, as we have just said, have suffered a lot in things that a lot of us can't imagine. But that goes not only to the other students, but also to the staff. And I think our teachers and staff are overly stressed. And you can see by what Pat put in here, we have stars in our throughout our schools, I know. But I think they're under too much pressure, really. And I also know of people in the community who are professionals in education who live here and go drive 25 minutes away because they could not afford to work in this district. And the health insurance benefits and pay. I don't see, I want to always be looking at the voter and the taxpayer, as we always have in any year I've ever been on this board. But I don't see where we can go less. And I'd like us to think about ways that they will cost money, not that you want them to. I think we need to go lower in the grades for hands-on learning for a lot of our, the high school kids usually start junior year, right? When they can go up to the Capital Technical School. That's a really big thing for a lot of the kids, and they could go so far. I wish that there were no stigma against that. I think it's fading. Four-year colleges are fading. Not that I'm against that either, but we have to think of ways to engage them in new ways and always be ahead of the curve on those things. And we can't do it by just staying exactly in the status quo. Angela?
I'm only 5 years into this district. So, but I want to say that I'm so incredibly impressed by the level of rapport that you have with each other and respect for one another, and the request you have for our district to learn to communicate to taxpayers the real challenges. But I also wonder if that can be a charge for all of us to do that effectively. And part of the reason I say that is because we're in the business of making sure our places are safe, secure, that we're always, that new families can come in and feel like we have it under control, right? We are going to make sure your child has a really quality education and strong social experiences and a safe place to be, and you'll be fed and taken care of, and whatever other mandates have come our way to support that learner. It is not in our nature to then say the world is falling apart at our feet, right? Like, we are experiencing things we've never seen. Our teachers and our administrators are first responders and are going through trauma every day. We're not gonna tell you that story every day, because would you feel like our schools are safe and secure? Honestly, they go out of their way to make sure it is for the children, but that sometimes is taxing for the adults. And so it's against our grain to have those kinds of conversations of saying, here's the reality. And don't you have pride and confidence in what we're doing with all of our youth? And so it's probably a learning curve for us to figure out where to strike that balance, to be real we always try to be transparent here, but to be transparent in that way, right? In that really vulnerable way, and say, please trust us with your children every single day, and we will make sure that despite all these challenges that we're experiencing, all children will have a safe, productive, unviable experience moving through their education. And I just, if you have skill in helping us think that through, we didn't go to school for marketing. We went to school to make sure your kid had what they needed, or your grandchild, or your nephew. And that takes a lot of time. And to be honest with you, no one's got it. We're all working amazing amount of hours, and I don't think we're wasting our time. We just, trying to learn how to do that. I think we need to do it in partnership with one another, and over time, we'll get better at this.
I agree, and I do think it needs to be a partnership. And not to oversimplify it, but if you went to the Home Depot and you got a receipt for $200 and it just said $200, you're gonna ask where.
Absolutely.
I wanna know what I spent my money on. That's the only thing that I'm advocating for, is for the taxpayers to understand, so that they can make the best decision for themselves.
Well, I agree. I'm a taxpayer not here, but in another district, and I want
I
the same
totally
thing.
understand what you're
Absolutely.
saying, and I do think that it is going to take a group effort to make it happen, but they have the right to that information.
Yeah.
The city, we get raked over the coals for every nickel that we spend. It's brutal. You wanna talk about transparency? Whew.
I'm taking a little grim satisfaction in knowing that every town and city in the state is having this same
It's rough.
conversation today.
It's rough.
But at the core of it, I think it's actually about, we can't give up on hope on Maine, because we love Maine. But if we don't turn around some of the population trends, we have this conversation every year. And we have to get everybody past being afraid.
We need good school districts to get people to move to your town,
And affordable
which
living.
lowers the tax base for everyone if people are buying homes in Gardner.
Like, everybody wants the same.
It's all
thing.
tied together,
Everybody wants a
but it has
decent
to be
job,
affordable
place
for
to live,
people too.
good education. But we can't solve all that in this room.
No, we gotta
But I
start
think all of
earlier.
us can solve it with a bunch of other rooms. And we can't tell retirees that, too bad, so sad.
No, what I was saying is the elderly people, fixed income, not
Exactly.
retirees. That's what I'm looking at in our town. Yeah. They did away with property tax?
One more question. We were supposed to do an hour, we're
Education
almost at
is
2, so
I know.
we need to wrap up.
And some people might fall asleep, and yes.
I just wanted to ask something and to see if you think I'm characterizing it correctly, because we've said a couple things in the room that I really believe in. One thing that Rusty mentioned is being a very responsible, lean district is a brag in one sense, but can be negative in the other. And part of what you had talked about is showing the base scale salaries and talking about how within a 30-mile radius, people could leave and earn anywhere from 5,000 to 15,000 more. And when you bring that up, we immediately want to think that we're competing over the best educators from different school districts. But one of the issues that education has is you're also competing with the private sector. And I don't think the taxpayers we represent necessarily need to bear the burden, but without investment in education, you can lose some of your best educators to the private sector. And then what you're really fighting over are mediocre teachers. And then we have conversations where these students are going to be our surgeons and our auto mechanics and people that we want to really know what they're doing. we're not always talking about the best educators when you bring up those statistics. I just want to see if you're also saying like, you're not just fighting districts, but you're fighting the private sector as well when you're trying to retain staff.
I think that's an excellent point, that we do have a few staff members who have elected to leave education for a variety of reasons. Some of it has to do with a financial decision, that they are able to leave the public sector, go into the private sector. When you think about those who specialize in science and in math especially, and they are able to make considerably more than they do in education. We are struggling, like many school districts around the state, to fill those positions that are more competitive with business, math, science. I mean, right now, we have filled all of those positions. So we're fortunate that we don't have any openings at the present time. But in the recent past, it's been absolutely a challenge. And I think it will continue to be a challenge. The other one is if you start looking at your ed tech positions, trying to find qualified, capable ed techs who want to work in the field of education is becoming more and more difficult.
I just want to let you guys aware that, like you were saying about the private sector, Richmond is moving out of their RSU, whatever it is, in June. The town of Richmond is taking over their elementary and high school.
Yeah, it's a tremendous struggle.
I'm not a fan of that.
I want to thank you all. And I will say that, you know, even throughout the pandemic and all the time that I've served on the school board, our school board meetings have not met with any of the acrimony that you see in so many places across the state and across the country. We have a group of volunteers who just love this work and who continue to do the work. And even when we find ourselves with an empty seat, we have some really wonderful person that steps up and says, I'll do it. And we've had that real experience. Very recently, Cullen, you came back, and we've got a couple other board members who aren't here who have done the same thing. But we work so hard at being here for each other, creating friendship, creating respect, and that we can do this together with you all as well, even though we make it look really peaceful, but there may be a boiling turmoil underneath. But I just am so grateful that we can have these kind of conversations honestly and openly, and that if you have other questions, that you'll reach out. If something comes to you in the night, text Pat. If something comes to you and you have questions, please just reach out. I'm happy to do what I can. I know that Pat is happy to, Angela, Andrea. We're always here we want you to be satisfied with the answers that you get, with the information that you have, and to be ambassadors to our community. And we will work really hard to be ambassadors to all of the surrounding communities as well, because we couldn't do this alone. None of this happens without all of us together. So thank you. You stayed well past your bedtime. And I really appreciate you coming out, and let's keep talking.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm serious.